Snowlight pooled across the ceiling like water, cold and silvery. Elena Voss came to consciousness slowly. First aware of the scent of smoke, pine and something faintly metallic, then of the weight of the blanket pinning her down. The fabric was too soft, too foreign. She was used to cheap cotton, not silk that whispered when she moved. Her pulse quickened. The last thing she remembered was the road curling up the mountains, tires sliding on black ice, a flash of headlights, and then nothing. Now she lay in a room that looked carved out of another century, stone walls hung with dark tapestries, a fire roaring inside an enormous hearth. Frost laced the window panes. Beyond them, snow fell endlessly into a forest of bare trees. Elena tried to sit up and gasped when pain shot through her shoulder. A bandage peeked from beneath her nightshirt. Someone had tended her wounds. Someone who was not here when she fell asleep on that road. Easy. The voice came from the doorway, low, accented, steady as a drumbeat. She turned. A man stood framed by the firelight, tall, broad-shouldered, his black shirt rolled to the elbows. He looked carved from the same granite as the mountains outside, a faint scar splitting his left eyebrow. In his hand, a silver signet ring caught the light. "You're safe," he said. "You were lucky the snow kept burning long enough for my men to find you." "My car." Elena's throat was dry. "Where am I? Who are you?" He crossed the room without hurry, like a predator that had already measured the distance. "Nikolai Volkov. This is my estate. You were brought here after the crash." The Elena's fingers clenched in the sheets. "I need a phone. I need to call. There is no signal here." He set a small porcelain cup of water beside her bed. "You should rest." She ignored the water. "Why am I here? Did you cause that accident?" Nikolai studied her, gray eyes unreadable. "If I wanted you dead, Ms. Voss, you would not have woken up at all." The calm certainty in his voice chilled her more than any threat. He reached into his pocket and withdrew something. An old, fashioned envelope, thick parchment sealed with black wax. He placed it on the quilt within her reach. "Your father left this with me." Elena stared at the seal. "My father died 3 months ago." "I know." His tone softened, just slightly. Frederick Voss was a complicated man. Before he died, he signed a contract. "You are the final clause." Her stomach turned. "What are you talking about?" "Rest," Nikolai said again, though his gaze held hers, unyielding. "Tomorrow, when your head is clearer, I will explain the debt and the danger that follows it." He turned toward the door, then paused as if remembering something. On the bedside table, he placed the signet ring, a heavy band engraved with a wolf's head. "Keep it close. It may save your life." When he left, the door closed with the quiet finality of a vault. Elena stared at the ring, then at the sealed letter. The fire snapped and hissed. Wind clawed at the shutters. Every instinct screamed that she should run, yet her body was weak, her shoulder throbbing. She tore the seal open with trembling fingers. Inside were only 2 lines, written in her father's sharp handwriting. "Twor forgive me. Twor trust no one named Volkov." The paper slipped from her hand as the room tilted. Outside, wolves howled through the snow. Morning broke behind curtains of snow. Elena woke to the steady hiss of wind scraping frost from the glass. Her shoulder ached less, but her mind was sharper and full of questions. The letter still lay on the table beside the bed, its edges curled from where she had gripped it through the night. "Trust no one named Volkova." She pressed her palms against the blanket, steadying herself. The scent of pine smoke lingered. Somewhere in the house, voices murmured in a language she didn't understand. Russian or something close. When she stood, her bare feet touched cold stone. The door wasn't locked. That, somehow, made her more uneasy. She stepped into a corridor that looked like part of a forgotten castle, arched ceilings, polished wood, faint traces of candle wax on the walls. A woman in a black dress appeared from nowhere, carrying a tray of folded linens. Her expression froze when she saw Elena awake. "Madame should not be walking," she said carefully, her accent thick but her tone respectful. "The master gave orders for rest." "The master," Elena repeated. "Is that what you call him?" The woman lowered her eyes. "Mr. Volkov saved your life. Breakfast is prepared in the East Hall." Then she turned and disappeared as quietly as she'd come. Elena followed the faint smell of coffee, through a series of rooms that seemed designed to confuse. Wide, echoing spaces filled with dark paintings and silent furniture. The east hall opened into a sunroom walled by glass. Outside, the snow was endless. Inside, the warmth from a stone hearth brushed her face. Nikolai Volkov sat at the table, reading a file thick with documents. He looked up as she entered. His gaze was the same as last night's, calm, assessing, a little too intent. "You should be in bed," he said. "I've been there long enough." Her voice surprised her, hoarse but steady. "I want to know what you meant." "About my father." He closed the file and gestured to the chair opposite him. "Set. Eat first." "I'm not hungry." "Then you'll listen on an empty stomach." Something about the quiet authority in his tone made her obey before she realized she'd moved. A plate of toast and berries waited before her, untouched. Nikolai leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Your father, Frederick Voss, was a brilliant banker. He built empires for men who preferred to stay in the shadows. My father among them. I know he made mistakes," she said, defensive. "Mistakes don't usually involve laundering $60 million of cartel money through European defense contracts." Nikolai replied mildly. "When the deception surfaced, my family faced ruin. I gave your father a choice: repay the debt, or see his name erased from every registry that mattered." Her stomach turned cold. "He never told me. He wouldn't. He had pride. But he also had a daughter." Nikolai slid the file toward her. "This is the contract he signed 6 months before his death. It pledges collateral in place of currency. His signature, his lawyers, my notaries. All legal in my world." Elena's breath caught as she read the heading: Personal Covenant of Guarantee. Subject: Elena Voss. Beneath the words was her father's handwriting. She traced it, disbelieving. "He can't have meant this. You're saying I'm..." "What?" "Payment. Collateral," Nikolai corrected. "Until the debt is settled. You kidnapped me. I pulled you from a burning car. There's a difference." His voice hardened. "Your father's enemies were closer than you think. 2 other groups claimed his debt. The men who forced your car off the road belonged to one of them. If I hadn't reached you first, you'd be in a shallow grave at the border." Elena's pulse raced. "You expect me to believe that?" "I expect nothing." He poured himself coffee with unhurried precision. "But whether you believe me or not, they will come again. And they will not care about your consent any more than the contract does." She pushed the file away. "You talk about consent like you understand it." A flicker of something, regret, maybe, passed over his face. "I understand it too well. Which is why you will remain here, under my protection, until I can neutralize the other claimants. I don't need your protection." He studied her in silence for a long moment. Then, softly, "Then tell me where you will go. Who will hide you when the others find out that Frederick Voss's daughter is alive?" Elena opened her mouth, then closed it. Her friends, her job, they were all in the city. Too easy to trace. She had no family left. Nikolai seemed to read the realization in her face. "You see, the world your father built left you nowhere to stand. Here, at least, you're safe. Safe," she repeated bitterly. "In a cage. Call it what you like." He stood, his chair scraping faintly. "I call it survival." He moved toward the window, the winter light sharp against his profile. "Your father was many things, Ms. Voss. A liar, yes. A coward, perhaps. But he loved you enough to beg for your life. That's why you're breathing. Don't waste that breath arguing with me." Elena rose. "You can keep your contract, Mr. Volkov. I'm not property, and I'm not staying." For the first time, anger touched his voice. "Step outside this estate, and the people who killed your father will finish their work. Then maybe I'll ask them, why?" She turned and walked toward the door, half expecting him to stop her. He didn't. When she glanced back, he was watching her with that same unreadable calm. "You'll see the truth soon enough," he said quietly. "When you do, remember that I warned you." The Elena stormed out, heart pounding. The corridors twisted like a maze, but she followed instinct, down a flight of stairs, through a service door, into biting cold. The snow blinded her. The estate sprawled below the cliffs, a fortress of dark stone and smoking chimneys. Beyond the gates, only wilderness. She took one step into the drifts and froze. A man in a black coat stood by the iron fence, half-shadowed. When she met his eyes, he smiled and lifted something gleaming. A rifle scope catching the sun. A shot rang out. Stone shattered inches from her shoulder. She fell back, breathless, into the snow. Then hands grabbed her, strong, unyielding, pulling her upright and back inside. Nikolai's voice was in her ear, rough with fury. "You just proved my point." He slammed the door behind them, the echo shaking the hall. Elena's breath came in ragged bursts as Nikolai dragged her down the corridor. Snow melted off their coats, leaving dark trails on the stone floor. "Let go of me," she shouted, twisting against his grip. Nikolai stopped only when they reached a heavy oak door. He opened it with a sharp motion and guided. No. Pushed her inside. The room beyond was vast and warm, lined with high shelves of books and lit by a chandelier that burned low over a polished desk. He shut the door with deliberate calm. Elena turned on him. "You think I'll thank you for saving me again?" His eyes were cold steel. "You nearly died because you refused to listen. Gratitude isn't required. Obedience is." Her voice shook, but she refused to lower it. "You don't own me." "No," he said quietly. "But until those men stop hunting you, I decide how you stay alive." The quiet finality in his tone left her no ground to argue. She sank into a nearby chair, shaking, anger and terror blurring together. Nikolai poured 2 glasses of clear liquid from a decanter and handed one to her. "Vodka?" she asked bitterly. "Water," he said. "The vodka's for after you've learned to stop running toward bullets." She didn't drink. "Who were they?" "Men from the Koval Syndicate," he answered. "Your father worked for them before he worked for me. He stole from all of us. Now they think taking you will make us settle his debt." Elena stared at the fire. "So you're saying my father destroyed every life he touched?" "I'm saying he was desperate." Nikolai's voice softened. "Desperate men make dangerous promises." He moved toward the fireplace, throwing a handful of papers into the flames. She glimpsed black ink before it curled into ash. "What are you burning?" "Your father's ledgers," he said. "The proof of how deep he went. You're destroying evidence. I'm protecting you. Those books would paint a target on your back in 10 different countries." He turned then, and for the first time, she saw exhaustion in his face. Fine lines around his eyes, the weariness of someone who hadn't slept in days. "I'm not your enemy, Elena." Her name and his voice sounded wrong, too personal, like something intimate forced into daylight. "Then what are you?" she asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the tall windows and gestured outward. From here she could see the estate spread below, a compound built into the mountainside. Guard towers, kennels, fences that glinted with frost. Shapes moved through the snow, large, lean wolves pacing between pines. "They're trained," she asked. "Half trained," Nikolai said. "Half wild. Like the men who live here." Elena stepped closer to the glass despite herself. One of the wolves lifted its head and looked straight at her. Its eyes were gold, almost human. "They don't fear me," he said, watching her. "They only obey because they choose to." She caught the edge of meaning in his words. "Like your staff. Like anyone who values survival." A silence stretched between them, filled by the wind outside. Finally she said, "You could have let me die in that car. Why didn't you?" His gaze met hers. "Because your father begged me to protect you if anything happened. Because I made a promise." "To him?" "No." He looked back toward the fire. "To myself." Elena felt the words settle somewhere deep, confusing her more than she wanted to admit. He walked to the door and opened it for her. "Your room is at the end of the west corridor. You'll find clothes in the wardrobe. Tonight you eat with the rest of the household. Tomorrow, you decide whether you'll keep fighting me or start fighting for your own survival." When snow fell without pause for 3 days. Each morning, the sky remained a dull pewter, and the world beyond the estate blurred into endless white. Elena began to understand why people went mad in isolation. The quiet had weight. It pressed on her until her thoughts grew too loud to bear. Nikolai's guards patrolled the property like ghosts. They nodded when she passed, but no one spoke. The housekeeper left meals by her door, And when Elena finally ventured out to explore, the corridors seemed to rearrange themselves, every hallway ending in a locked door or a shadow that watched her pass. Still, she walked. She needed to understand her prison. The mansion's west wing opened into a series of workrooms. Maps pinned to walls, ledgers stacked in neat rows. An old armory converted into what looked like a command center. The walls hummed with quiet energy from hidden machinery. In one room, she found Nikolai. He stood before a long table strewn with files, his sleeves rolled to the elbows, a pistol beside a cup of untouched tea. He didn't hear her at first. He was staring at a photograph of several men in military uniforms, younger versions of themselves. When she cleared her throat, he looked up, expression unreadable. "You're not supposed to be in this wing," he said. "I was looking for the exit," she replied. "You hide it well." One corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "It's not hidden, it's guarded. There's a difference." He picked up the pistol, checked the safety, then set it back down. "You should rest." "You keep saying that," she said, stepping closer. "But the more you say it, the less I believe rest is what you want." He studied her for a long time. "You're right. What I want is for you to stop thinking like a victim. Excuse me. You're waiting for someone to save you. The truth is, no one's coming." He gestured to the map. "Everyone your father dealt with is dead, imprisoned, or waiting for the next chance to take what he owed. You can curse me, or you can learn how to survive in a world that doesn't care about your outrage." Her hands curled into fists. "You talk like you didn't help build that world." "I didn't build it," he said. "I inherited it. And then I learned how to keep it from devouring me." Something flickered in his eyes. Memory, maybe. She saw it before he looked away. "Who were you before all this?" she asked. Nikolai hesitated, then said quietly, "A soldier. Long before you were old enough to understand what war does to a man." He picked up a small knife from the table and turned it idly in his fingers. When the Soviet units fractured, the survivors were left with nothing. No country, no honor, just a choice between starving or selling what we knew. I chose the latter. My father called it survival. I call it penance. Elena was silent for a moment. Penance for what? He met her gaze squarely. For learning that mercy gets people killed. The words hung between them like smoke. "Then why show me any?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Because sometimes mercy is strategy." She should have been angry, but instead, something in his tone made her uneasy. It wasn't arrogance. It was exhaustion. The voice of a man who had seen too much and found no way to stop seeing. Later that evening, Elena followed the sound of voices to the dining hall. For the first time, she saw the others who lived within the walls. 12 of them, men and women dressed plainly, but carrying themselves like soldiers. They stood when she entered. Nikolai was at the head of the table. "You've met my staff," he said. "You'll eat with them from now on." The conversation during dinner was sparse. They discussed weather, shipments, routes, everything coded, nothing explained. Still, Elena noticed small details, how they deferred to Nikolai without fear, how his glance was enough to quiet a room. He didn't rule by terror. He ruled by belief. After the meal, she lingered near the fire. One of the women, a medic named Anya, approached quietly. "He doesn't sleep much," Anya murmured. "When he does, it's only after he's certain the house is secure." Elena frowned. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you look at him and see a cage," Anya said. "Some of us see a man holding the door shut so the wolves stay outside." Before Elena could answer, Nikolai's voice came from behind them. "Anya, enough." The woman inclined her head and slipped away. Nikolai's eyes held a warning, but also something else. Concern. "The wolves are restless tonight," he said quietly. "Stay inside." That night, Elena dreamed of her father's voice, whispering that the storm came without warning. One moment, the mountain slept under a quiet veil of snow. The next, the wind screamed across the ridges like something alive. Elena woke to the sound of alarms. Short, clipped bursts of sirens that echoed through the corridors. The floor vibrated faintly under her bare feet. She threw on a coat and ran to the door, wrenching it open. A guard sprinted past. "Stay inside," he barked in accented English. "Lock the door. Now." "What's happening?" she called, but he was gone before the words left her mouth. She hesitated only a second before following. The air in the hall smelled of smoke and cold metal. Lights flickered. From somewhere below came the sharp rhythm of gunfire, quick bursts, then silence. The sound was so sudden, so raw, that her mind struggled to believe it was real. She moved toward the stairwell, keeping close to the wall. When she reached the landing, she saw shadows crossing the lower hall. 3 figures in dark winter gear, faces masked, rifles raised. They were not Nikolai's men. Panic surged. She pressed herself against the wall, praying they hadn't seen her. A voice behind her said quietly, "You disobey instructions faster than anyone I've ever met." She turned, heart hammering. Nikolai stood at the top of the stairs, dressed in black, a sidearm in one hand, his expression unreadable. "Back to your room," he said. "You're being attacked." "I know." He handed her something cold and heavy. She looked down to find a compact pistol in her hands. Safety on top. "Don't touch the trigger unless you have no choice." She stared at it. "You think I can shoot someone?" "I think survival makes us all good students." Before she could reply, a crash echoed from below, the front doors bursting open. Wood splintering. Nikolai turned sharply. "Go," he said, voice low. "Down the east corridor. Storage room at the end. Lock yourself in." Elena hesitated. "And you?" "I'll clean up the mess." He descended the stairs without another word. She forced herself to move. Her hands shook, the pistol heavy and alien in her grip. The power flickered again, plunging half the hall into shadow. Halfway down the corridor, she heard footsteps. Too close, too fast. A masked man rounded the corner ahead of her, rifle raised. Time fractured. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. The muzzle of the gun glinted, black and endless. She remembered Nikolai's words, "Don't touch the trigger unless you have no choice." He fired first. The bullet hit the wall inches from her face, showering her with plaster. Instinct took over. She dropped to one knee, raised the pistol, and pulled the trigger, once. The recoil jolted through her arm. The man fell. The silence after was worse than the gunfire. Elena crawled forward, shaking, the smell of gunpowder and fear thick in her throat. The man's eyes were open, fixed on nothing. Blood spread beneath him, a dark stain against the marble floor. She staggered back, pressing her fist against her mouth to keep from screaming. Footsteps again, this time heavy, measured. She turned the gun toward the sound. Easy. Nikolai appeared from the smoke, a cut above his brow, blood on his sleeve. "It's over." Elena's hands trembled. He tried to. "I know." He took the gun from her gently. "You did what you had to." "I killed him." "You survived him." He guided her away from the body, down the hall to the library. The fire still burned there, casting light across the shattered glass of a broken window. Snow swirled through the air. 2 of his men were securing the room, dragging another intruder's body toward the door. Nikolai poured a measure of vodka and pressed the glass into her hand. "Drink." She shook her head. "It'll stop the shaking." The Elena took a small sip. The burn of alcohol steadied her just enough to breathe. "Who were they?" she whispered. "Koval's men," he said. "They must have tracked the supply routes. Someone inside the network betrayed me." He looked toward the window, where the storm raged harder than before. "They won't try again soon. Not in this weather." Elena set the glass down. Her pulse still pounded in her ears. "You knew they'd come." "I suspected. I hoped I was wrong." He turned toward her, his eyes softer now. "You saved yourself tonight, Elena. That matters." She looked down at her hands, still stained faintly with blood. "It doesn't feel like something to be proud of." "It never does the first time," he said quietly. "But you'll remember that you were strong when it mattered. That's the difference between the living and the dead." The fire cracked, filling the silence between them. For the first time, she saw the faint tremor in his fingers as he reloaded his weapon. Beneath the armor of command he was human too, frayed, vulnerable, fighting the same storm that threatened to swallow them both. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, their eyes met across the firelight. The air thick with things neither dared to say. The blizzard had swallowed the estate whole. For 2 days, the world outside was nothing but white noise and wind and inside, the air carried the heavy quiet that follows violence. The broken windows had been repaired, the blood scrubbed clean. Yet the silence still smelled faintly of gunpowder and fear. Elena hadn't seen Nikolai since the attack. She'd overheard whispers from the staff. Someone had betrayed him. Someone inside his own network. But no one said a name aloud. Fear moved through the halls like smoke. On the third morning, she found him in the chapel. It was a small stone room built into the far corner of the estate, candlelight flickering against walls carved with saints. Nikolai stood before the altar, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up, bruises still shadowing his jaw. He was staring at a single candle as though it might answer him. "You don't strike me as religious," she said softly. He didn't turn. "I'm not. But I owe debts to too many ghosts not to visit them." Elena stepped closer. "Your men say one of your own betrayed you." He gave a low, humorless laugh. "They don't need to say it. I already know who." She waited. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. "My half-brother." "Sargi," Elena frowned. "You never mentioned you had family." "There are reasons for that." He leaned on the altar, the candlelight sharpening the planes of his face. "When our father died, the organization split in two. Sergei took what he thought he could control. Ports, contracts, the political side. I took what he called the dirty work. The soldiers. The blood. And now he's trying to take it all." She guessed. "He's not just trying." His gaze met hers. "He's the one who sent Koval's men. He wants you alive, because you're the last leverage my enemies can use." Her pulse quickened. "So I'm just a bargaining chip in a family war?" "You were," he said simply. "Until last night." She crossed her arms. "And what am I now?" He studied her for a moment before answering. "A liability I can't afford to lose." It wasn't what she wanted to hear. But there was something beneath the words, something unspoken that unsettled her more than the cold. He moved past her, pausing at the doorway. "Come with me." She followed him through the maze of corridors to his office. On the desk lay 2 passports, both freshly printed. One bore her picture. He gestured to them. "One ticket out, one back to the city under a new name. If you take it, you can disappear before Sergei finds you. You'll have enough to start over." The Elena stared at him. "And the other?" "The other keeps you here," he said. "Under my protection. But if you stay, you're part of this, my war, my family, my enemies. You don't get to walk away later. You're giving me a choice. I told you before. This time, you decide." She looked down at the passport, her own eyes staring back from the photo. It should have been easy. Freedom was what she'd wanted since she'd woken in this place. Yet now, staring at the thin booklet that promised safety, she felt only a hollow ache. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why give me a way out when you could just keep me here?" Nikolai's voice was low. "Because I'm tired of keeping people against their will. And because if the morning after her decision, the mountain was eerily calm. The sky had cleared. A pale blue glass stretched above the world, and sunlight spilled over the snow, dazzling and sharp. But inside the estate, the stillness felt like the moment between a heartbeat and a gunshot. Elena woke early and found Nikolai already gone. His guards had doubled their patrols, and the mood in the house had turned from discipline to tension. The scent of gun oil hung in the air, and even the servants moved faster, quieter. She dressed and went exploring, driven by a need to do something. If she was going to stay here, if she was truly part of this now, she needed answers. The West Wing was where the truth lived. She found the door Nikolai had always kept locked. A heavy steel thing bolted into the stone. But this morning, it was ajar. A careless oversight, or an invitation. Either way, she pushed it open. The room beyond was colder than the rest of the house. Filing cabinets lined the walls. Computers blinked with green lights. And in the center of the room stood a table covered with folders stamped with different symbols. Wolf's head, crown, serpent, dagger. It looked less like an office and more like a war room. Elena's pulse quickened. Her name appeared on one of the files. She reached for it, hesitating for only a moment before flipping it open. Inside were bank records, transfers, digital signatures, all connected to her father. But what made her stomach drop wasn't the money. It was the other names on the papers. Government ministers, shipping companies, defense contractors, and one word repeated across the top of every page: F Council. She whispered it aloud, as if naming it might explain it. But it didn't. Not what you expected. Is it? She spun around. Nikolai stood in the doorway, arms folded, expression unreadable. You were watching me, she said. I watch everything in my house. She pointed to the papers. You said my father laundered money for you. For criminals. You didn't mention this. Whatever the hell it is. That's because it's bigger than me, Nikolai said quietly. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The council isn't a syndicate or a company. It's an alliance. Politicians, financiers, arms dealers, corporations. People who decide wars before they happen. Your father worked for them long before he worked for me. Elena stared at him, cold sinking into her bones. He was one of them. He was their banker, Nikolai said. But he changed sides. He tried to expose them. That's when he came to me. He wanted protection. A way to hide evidence. But the council found him first. The memory of the crash, the headlights, the sound of metal tearing, flashed through her mind. You think they killed him? I don't think, Nikolai said. I know. He found something they wanted buried. He moved closer to the table and pulled a USB drive from one of the folders. He sent this to me 3 months before he died. Said it contained names, proof, everything. I never had time to open it. Elena took it, feeling the weight of it in her palm. So small, so ordinary, and yet, it pulsed with possibility. Then let's open it. Nikolai shook his head. Not here. The network isn't secure. If they're monitoring the systems, they'll know the moment we plug it in. Then we take it somewhere safe, she said. A faint, almost reluctant smile touched his mouth. You're starting to think like me. I'm thinking like someone who's done being lied to. He studied her. The intensity in his gaze softened by something like admiration. Your father would have been proud of that. Elena's throat tightened. Don't tell me what my father would have felt. He loved you, Nikolai said. For all his sins, that part was real. She turned away, blinking hard. If this council is as powerful as you say, they'll come for that drive. For me. They already are, he said. Sergei is their messenger. He's been feeding them my rotes and my secrets. They use him because he's desperate to destroy me. So we expose them first. His eyebrows lifted slightly. We? You said I'm part of this now, she reminded him. You don't get to shut me out. He hesitated, then nodded. There's one more thing you should see. He led her through a hidden door behind the filing cabinets, down a spiral stair that opened into a cellar lined with old wine racks. But instead of bottles, every alcove held documents. Boxes labeled with dates and code names. This is everything I took from the council's operations in the East, Nikolai said. Evidence of what they've done. People they've killed. Governments they've bought. Oh, Elena brushed her fingers along one box. The label read Operation Glass Veil. Why haven't you released any of it? Because truth without power is suicide, he said simply. Once you expose them, you have to survive long enough to make it matter. She looked at him, understanding dawning slowly. That's why you saved me. Nikolai didn't answer. But his silence told her everything. For the first time, she saw beyond the myth of the Mafia king, the brutality, the control. Beneath it, there was strategy. And beneath that, something that looked almost like faith. When they left the vault, the house was quiet again. But as they reached the stairs, a faint echo drifted through the halls. A phone ringing, sharp and insistent. One of the guards appeared pale. Boss, he said in Russian. Sergei. He says he wants to talk. Nikolai took the receiver from him, eyes hardening. You have 30 seconds. A distorted voice crackled through the line, half laughing. Little brother, you have something that belongs to us. Elena froze. The accent was colder than Nikolai's, but unmistakably similar. Nikolai's jaw flexed. You'll never get it. Oh, I will, Sergei said. But first, you should know. You're not the only Volkov protecting a Voss. The line went dead. Nikolai's expression darkened. He's found another way to reach you. Elena's heart stuttered. What does that mean? He looked at her for a long time. Then said, It means your father wasn't the only one who made a deal. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. Though no storm had yet appeared, the storm had passed, but its silence was worse than its roar. Days later, the mountain lay under a pale sky, too still, too clean, like the world was holding its breath. The estate was quieter now, too quiet. The guards spoke little, their eyes shifting toward the forests whenever the wind changed. It wasn't fear of Sergei alone that haunted them. It was the certainty of something larger. Elena felt it too. The peace was brittle, the calm before the strike. She found Nikolai on the balcony that overlooked the lower valley, his breath steaming in the cold air. His coat was black, his expression unreadable as he studied the road that coiled down the mountain like a scar. You haven't slept, she said. I don't sleep when the wolves are restless, he replied. Our men at the border heard rumors. Sergei has gone to Prague. He's called a gathering. The council, she said. He's meeting them. Nikolai nodded slowly. They're moving faster than I expected. If he's there, it means he's taking them something valuable. Maybe proof your father's data still exists. Elena hesitated. The drive? He looked at her. They won't stop until they have it, and you. You're the one person who can verify what's on it. So what do we do? He turned fully toward her. We'll go to Prague. She blinked. You're serious. A's a bullet, he said, faint amusement touching his mouth. If we wait, they'll find us here. At least in Prague we choose the battlefield. Elena's mind raced. They'll have every camera, every weapon. I know. His gaze softened. That's why you'll go as yourself, and I'll go as your shadow? Your shadow? She repeated. He smiled faintly. Every queen needs a ghost behind her throne. She shook her head. You're insane. Possibly. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. But if you want to end this, if you want your father's death to mean something, then we can't keep hiding. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Then teach me what I need to know. The next days were a blur of motion. Nikolai turned the grand hall into a training ground. He showed her how to shoot without flinching, how to read faces, how to use silence as a weapon. His lessons were merciless, but he never raised his voice. When she failed, he made her try again until she didn't. Never aim to scare, he told her. Aim to end. Never speak first, he said. Let them reveal what they fear. Never trust the handshake that comes with a smile. Sometimes, in those late hours when the fire burned low, he let his walls drop for seconds at a time. She saw it in his eyes. The exhaustion of a man who had learned too many hard lessons, who had built an empire just to have somewhere no one could touch him. And yet here she was, inside it. When the day came to leave, the mountain seemed to sense it. The air hung heavy with fog. The wolves didn't howl. They only watched as the convoy rolled down the road, 2 armored SUVs and an unmarked van. The journey to Prague took 12 hours. Through the window, Elena watched the world change from snow to stone, from forest to city. By the time they reached the outskirts, the sky had turned the color of bruised steel. They stopped in a warehouse near the river. Nikolai's men checked the surroundings with precision. He handed her a small earpiece. If we're separated, you keep the channel open. What happens if they recognize you? She asked. He smiled, sharp and humorless. Then I'll kill the lights. Inside the van, he opened a case and revealed evening wear. An elegant black gown for her, a tailored suit for himself. The contrast between war and civility made her dizzy. They expect a performance, he said. We'll give them one. That night, the council's summit began in an old opera house gilded in gold and deceit. Politicians, magnates, and mercenaries mingled under crystal chandeliers. Elena entered at Nikolai's side, her hair swept back, her father's pendant at her throat. The music masked whispers, but every glance that brushed her carried knowledge. She was the daughter of Frederick Voss, the banker who had betrayed them. The bait. At the top of the grand staircase stood Sergei Volkov. He looked like Nikolai's reflection warped by cruelty. Same gray eyes, same height, but thinner, hungrier. He smiled when he saw them. spreading his arms as if welcoming family. "Brother," Sergei said, voice slick with venom. "You brought the girl. How thoughtful." Nikolai's voice was quiet steel. "Cut the theater. What do you want?" Sergei's smile widened. "Only what belongs to the council. The data your little pet is hiding." Elena forced herself not to flinch. "It doesn't belong to you," she said. "It's proof of what you are." "Oh, I admire the fire," Sergei said. "Just like your father before he screamed." Nikolai moved faster than thought. One moment he was still, the next. He had Sergei pinned against the marble pillar, gun pressed beneath his chin. The guards around the hall froze. "Careful," Sergei hissed. "You don't want to start a war in front of witnesses." "This is the war," Nikolai said. Elena stepped forward. "Stop." Her voice cut through the air. Nikolai hesitated, the line of his jaw tight, then lowered the gun slowly. Sergei laughed. "So she commands you now. How poetic. Enjoy your last performance," Nikolai said quietly. "When the lights go out, I'll finish what father couldn't." Sergei's grin faltered. The orchestra, the opera house, pulsed with wealth and danger. Beneath the chandeliers, the music shifted into a low, trembling rhythm. Waiters moved between marble columns like shadows, serving champagne to people whose smiles were knives. Elena felt every eye turn toward her and Nikolai as they descended the grand staircase. She understood then why he'd chosen this place. Because power never hides in darkness. It hides in plain sight, under the bright lights of civility. Nikolai's hand brushed hers briefly. "Stay close," he murmured. "I'm not your shadow," she whispered back. "No," he said. "You're the distraction." Before she could respond, Sergei's voice echoed through the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced with theatrical pride, "our honored guests have arrived. Nikolai Volkov, the prodigal son, and the late Frederick Voss's beautiful heir." The crowd turned as one. Conversations died. The orchestra faltered. Elena forced herself to stand tall. If she looked afraid, she'd already lost. Sergei moved down the staircase, his smile too sharp to be human. When he reached them, he gestured for the crowd's attention. "Tonight," he said, "the council welcomes new witnesses to history." Behind him, a vast screen unfurled above the stage, black glass waiting for light. "Our friends in finance," Sergei continued, "have provided footage of our regrettable tragedy, one that unites us all in grief." The screen flickered to life. Grainy footage filled the air, a dark road, headlights, a car sliding across ice. A second vehicle followed, larger, faster. Gunfire. The smaller car spun out of control, hit a guardrail, and tumbled into a ravine. Then, through the blur, a figure stepped from the second vehicle, lit by firelight. Nikolai. The image froze on his face. Gasps rippled through the audience. Elena's knees weakened. The world tilted. Sergei turned to her with mock sympathy. "Your father's murderer, dear sister-in-law." Nikolai didn't move. His jaw was set, his eyes locked on the screen. "That's not real." Sergei spread his arms. "Denial is tedious, brother. The truth burns whether you face it or not." Elena's breath came in shallow bursts. "Tell me it's not true." "It's fabricated," Nikolai said, his voice low but steady. "Look at the timestamp." She blinked through tears. The lower corner of the footage glowed faintly. The numbers flickered, imperfect, misaligned. A digital glitch. Her mind cleared like glass snapping back into focus. "It's fake," she said softly. "You spliced the files." Sergei's smile cracked. "You think I'd risk everything for a lie," she finished. "Yes. You would." She reached into her coat and pulled out the flash drive her father had hidden, holding it high so the cameras caught it. "This is the real record." The room erupted. Guards moved. Sergei lunged. Nikolai fired first. The chandelier shattered, plunging the hall into chaos. Lights burst. Sparks raining down. Screams echoed through the marble. Elena ducked behind the stage as bullets tore through the velvet curtains. "Get to the exit." Nikolai shouted through the gunfire. He was bleeding, she saw. The bullet had grazed his shoulder, but he kept firing, methodical, controlled. She clutched the flash drive to her chest, heart pounding. "We can't leave without proof." "Upload it," he shouted back. "No." The control booth above the stage flickered with emergency light. Elena climbed the narrow staircase, breathless, dodging falling debris. On the second landing, a council guard reached for her. She swung the butt of her pistol into his jaw, sending him tumbling down the stairs. At the top, she found the terminal, a sleek console linked to the projection system. She jammed the drive into the port. The screen on stage flickered, then bloomed to life again. Not Sergei's edited footage, but her father's real message. Frederick Voss appeared, older and tired, his voice trembling. "Chor, if you're watching this, I'm already dead. The council controls everything. Trade, war, elections. They bought the Volkov empire to launder their power. I tried to stop them. Now my daughter must finish what I couldn't." The crowd froze. Even the guards hesitated. Nikolai reached the stage, blood soaking his sleeve. He stood beside her as the video ended, the silence more powerful than gunfire. Sergei screamed, "Kill them both." But no one moved. The council's members were already retreating, faces pale, masks cracking. Their empire was built on secrecy. And now, every camera in the world was watching. Sergei's rage turned feral. He drew his weapon and fired. Elena barely saw it happen. Nikolai moved faster, pulling her close as the shot rang out. Pain flared across his chest. He stumbled, eyes wide, then forced one last shot that struck Sergei squarely in the heart. The echo hung in the air like the end of an oath. Sergei collapsed, his blood spilling across the white marble floor. Around them, chaos dissolved into silence. Elena dropped to her knees beside Nikolai. No. Stay with me." He smiled faintly, blood on his lips. "Looks like you finished what your father started. Don't you dare die," she whispered, pressing her hands against the wound. His gaze softened. "You chose to stay," he murmured. "Now keep choosing." The sirens outside grew louder. Police, reporters. A world too late to the truth. She leaned down and kissed him, tasting smoke and iron. "I'm not leaving you." His breath shuddered. "Good," he whispered. "Then I'll have something worth coming back for." The light faded from his eyes as the world exploded with noise. The first thing Elena heard when she woke was the sound of waves. For a moment she thought she was still dreaming. The rhythm too gentle, too unreal after the storm of Prague. Then light spilled through the curtains, warm and golden, and she remembered she was alive. Pain bloomed behind her eyes when she sat up. Her arm was bandaged. The air smelled faintly of salt and antiseptic. She was in a seaside villa, not a hospital. Someone had brought her here. Someone had saved her. Nikolai, her pulse stumbled. The last thing she remembered was the opera house exploding with sirens. The roar of crowds, the warmth of his blood on her hands. "He's dead," someone had shouted. "Leave him." But she hadn't. She had dragged him out, half conscious, through glass and gunfire until the night swallowed them both. She rose slowly, finding her balance. A nurse entered, a local woman, kind-faced, speaking in soft Russian. "He's awake," she said simply. "You should see him." Elena followed her through a sunlit corridor that opened onto a terrace overlooking the sea. Nikolai sat there in a wheelchair, shirt loose around his bandaged chest, watching the horizon. He turned when he heard her. "You look like hell," he said, voice rough but alive. She almost laughed, almost cried. "You shouldn't be moving. Try stopping me." She stepped closer. "You took a bullet for me." He looked at her for a long time before answering. "It was the only debt I hadn't paid." The waves crashed softly below. Seagulls wheeled in the distance, oblivious to the ruins they'd left behind in Prague. The council had scattered, its leaders retreating into the shadows to lick their wounds. The files her father had gathered were now public, evidence of corruption, of power games that had shaped entire nations. The world was reeling. "You did it," Nikolai said quietly. "The truth's out." "We did it," she corrected. "But it's not over." He gave a faint smile. "It never is." She leaned on the railing beside him, watching sunlight scatter across the water. "What happens now?" "Now." He reached into his coat and placed a small velvet box between them. Inside lay a simple ring, silver, engraved with the same wolf's head as the one he'd given her in the mountains. "Now you stop running from who you are." Elena stared at it, heart pounding. "Are you asking me?" "No contracts this time," he said softly. "No debts. Just a choice." She hesitated, memories flashing through her mind: the crash, the captivity, the battles, the blood. The man before her was still all of that. Danger, contradiction, scarred truth. But he was also the reason she'd survived. She took the ring and slipped it on. Then my choice is this: we build something new. No empires. No chains. Nikolai's smile reached his eyes for the first time. Freedom with you, then. I can live with that. He tried to stand, and she caught his arm, steadying him. Together they faced the horizon, the sea endless before them. Behind them, the past burned quietly to ash. Elena turned to him. The council will come back. Let them, Nikolai said. The wolves still remember how to hunt. As the sun dipped lower, its light turned the waves to gold. For the first time in years, the world felt wide enough for hope. The girl who had once been collateral now stood beside the man who had once been her captor, both unbound, both scarred, both free. And when he reached for her hand, she didn't flinch. The mountain had taken everything from them. The sea gave it back,